Man, man. Alright guys, Tuesday the 29th of December 2020, and a little bit late start to the day today. It's about 5:30 p.m. I did start without you. I did manage to clean the garage up, and we got our tires put back on the rear. So just ready to start another session here. First thing I'm going to do today, or this evening, is I've got a stripped bolt and nut on the bottom of my alternator bracket. So I have to figure a way to get this off. I may end up having to cut it off, but I do have a new bolt to put in there. Fortunately, I've gone through my bolt store and I found a long enough bolt to fit in there. So we're going to try to get that nut off, and then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to change out, as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to change out our sway bar mounts here for something a little beefier. I have some in inventory that I'm going to swap out. So we'll do those two things first, and then we will worry about starting to get the car ready to start on Saturday. They bring some gauges down to play with to hook up to the lines, and I've tightened my spark plugs down. So I have kind of started already doing a few things here and there, but once I pick that part of this process up, I'll bring you back. Alright, the sway bar bracket ends have been changed out along with the bushings, and they look better in my mind, much beefier, and we've put that new bolt in the bottom of the alternator bracket, so that's nice and sturdy now. So on to getting the car prepped for starting, and I'll try to take you through the stages. First thing I wanted to do was to do a closed loop on this circuit here. So I've just got one of the silicone hoses here that we're going to attach up here, and we'll close that loop off for the test start, and we'll move on from there. Next thing I want to do is be able to mount some gauges. So I've just pulled an old scrap dash out of my storage shed. Again, don't throw anything away. I'm going to build a couple of angle brackets off of these holes here, and we'll make them come up, and then we'll screw the dash into these two angles that come off the frame, and that should just hold it securely enough to hold some gauges. And maybe a starting switch. All right, dashboard is installed. So that's what that looks like. I think that will suffice. Hopefully I've got enough clearance here in this socket for the gauges. If not, I'll have to trim that bar down. But other than that, that's looking good. It's pretty solid, not too wobbly, so let's install some gauges in there. Alright guys, the temporary dashboard is now installed. We've got the oil pressure gauge hooked up. Temperature gauge, I'm going to have to figure out how to hook that up. I think I have to move that or wire it up through the voltage stabilizer, which is here on the back of the speedometer. I'm going to find the tack cable in the bins over there. I've got to go through and find the tack cable so we can hook that up to the distributor. And we should be good to go as far as the dash is concerned. I think the next thing I'll do is I'll try to figure out how I'm going to do the throttle. So I've got something in mind for that. So we'll whip something together with some scrap, and we'll see if we can get that to work properly. Alright guys, Wednesday the 30th, and we're going to pick up where we left off. I'm going to try to make some sort of mechanism to actuate this throttle rod here. I know I'm not going to need to actually, change the throttle very much during my engine break-in. I think it's got to be at about between 2,000 and 2,500 RPM for about 20 minutes for the break-in of the cam. So once we have it set, we're not going to really play around with it much. I also do have the provision to probably just use this screw over here to set the throttle shaft, but I'm going to do a little bit of a backup system just in case that doesn't work, and we'll figure something out to actuate that and lock the throttle where we need it to be for the engine break-in. So let me figure something out, and we'll bring you back when I do. Alright guys, my throttle is now done. So I've just used, again, just a bunch of scrap laying around the garage. A couple of pieces of this angle that I usually use on the bracketry to brace my doors when I'm doing the lift off of the body. So I've used a couple pieces of that, just bolted to the frame. Used a piece of this round tubing. I think this used to be an old closet organizer. I've actually just squared or pounded the tube flat a little bit and slid a nut in there to keep it from collapsing on the bottom. And we just have a bolt here bolted fairly tightly so that when we move the drive-by wire throttle, you can see it just pulls on the wire and then it'll just keep some tension on it. So I get full throttle movement if I want. There's full down and back up. So I'll just tighten that up to where I need it to be for it to sit, and that should be good to go. So we'll mark that one off the list. So let's move on to something else. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to make a little bit of a threaded rod, slotted threaded rod, to drive the oil pump to prime the engine prior to startup. So in order to do that, we're going to remove the distributor. I just have this sitting in here loosely. We're just going to remove the distributor. We're going to take the pedestal off so we can get the drive gear up and out. So let me do that now and I'll bring you back. Okay, so here's where we're at. We have access to the drive gear now, and all I'm going to use is a magnetic pickup tool. This is not my strongest one. I'm hoping it'll work, but we're going to lift that gear up and out, and you'll notice that it spins as it comes out, so you just kind of got to twist as it comes out. There you go. So there is the drive gear removed. So we're going to make a dog to engage that oil pump at the bottom of the oil bush, so we can spin that up to make some oil pressure eventually. So as mentioned, you could use a piece of threaded rod like this one and cut a slot in the bottom of it to engage the oil pump. But I'm not real happy about using threaded rod in this application. First of all, this is a little bit thin, and I'm worried about it sort of wallowing back and forth within the bushing and scratching all that up. So I think I wanted to try something else. I've got some extensions for sockets. I've got quite a few extensions. So I'm thinking of using an extension from a socket. I've just checked to make sure it fits in the chuck of my drill. It's got a little bit more precise fit, and it doesn't have obviously the cuttings for the threads, which I tend to think damage or can damage that bushing a bit more, and it's obviously softer metal. So I think we'll try the extension from the socket and see if that works a little bit better, and then we'll have that for future projects. So here's the extension I'm going to use, and I'm just going to hack off the bottom and the top of this. I've already chucked it in my drill to make sure that the jaws are wide enough to accept this. So let's cut the ends off, and then we'll cut the slot in, and then I'll show you how this is going to work. Okay, there's our trimmed socket extension. So we're going to try to cut a slot to mimic the slot in the bottom of the drive gear. You don't want to try to make it overly wide, as that's going to wallow in there as well. So we'll try to make it a fairly exact fit on the oil pump shaft, and so it doesn't move around. All right, guys, there's that extension, and you can see it just fits perfectly in that bush. So we've got a nice snug fit in there. Hopefully I'll be able to get it out. So again, so it doesn't wallow around, let me just try to pull this back out. I didn't force it in, but it is a snug fit, so I'll probably have to grab a pair of pliers to pull it out. But anyway, it's in there nicely. There we go. So there's a quick look at the bottom of that. So again, this will fit nicely in the drill. And just a quick note that when you prime the oil pump, you want to make sure that your drill is spinning in reverse, not forward, reverse. And that's what it'll look like when the drill is installed on that old socket extension. So that's ready to go. So we will not prime it now. We'll wait until we're ready to fire the engine. So it's another thing checked off the list, so we'll move on to something else. So next we'll work on the fuel system. So I'm going to need a fuel pump. Now technically I could run a gas tank from the mechanical pump, which is installed and ready to go, but I think my preference is for a first startup is to use an electric pump. I do have an electric pump that I use generally to do this, and it's hanging up over there on the wall. So I think what we'll do is we'll go grab that and we'll connect it up here directly to the fuel inlet on the Webers, and we'll get that clamped up and ready to go, and then that'll just be attached to the battery with some temporary jumpers to fire that pump up when needed. So let's go and do that. Guys, there's the Purelator electric pump just mounted to the frame with a zip tie. We've made sure we've got the flow going in the right direction. We've got it plumbed up to the T in the first carb and clamped there, so that's ready to go. The electrical connections will go to the right-hand side of the car. We're going to have a booster box that will power the fuel pump and the electric fan if required. We don't expect that we'll need the electric fan, but just in case we do, we'll have the jump box standing by. The good thing about the jump box is if we need to disconnect the fuel pump quickly, it has a switch off on it, so you can just switch the power off. So that's what we're going to do. I know I can hook the fuel pump up directly to my other power source, which is going to be powering the coil, but I'll just hook it up here to the front. We'll put the gas cam up front here away from the front of the car, and that will be the setup as far as fuel is concerned. So that's ready to go. Just need to throw a little bit more wiring on there that I have standing by in my little electrical kit over here. So we're good to go there. Next thing. All right, I think I'll take a little bit of a break for some breakfast, but the next thing I'll do when I come out is I'm going to start dragging the bins out again. I need to find my tack cable for one thing, and a few other things I'm looking for, including a ignition switch. Can always use the ignition switch from the car if I have to, but I know I have one that I used for my TR3 startup. I just can't find it at the moment, so hopefully I'll be able to find that kicking around somewhere. I'm running out of options of places to look. So if I can't find that, I can always use the ignition switch from the actual TR250 that's in those boxes as well. So let's take a bit of a break, and then we'll get back out here and start going through the bins. All right, back in the garage after some breakfast, and managed to grab the battery out of the trailer, and we've just got it on charge. So we'll get that charged up. We'll get the battery pack, which is in the back of the truck in the garage, we'll get that charged up as well. So I guess it's time to get into the bins and do a little bit of searching. So we'll move some stuff out of the way and start going through the bins and see what we can find. All right, that was a successful hunt. Found my tack and speedo cables. Found my battery cables. Found my ignition switch that I used when I started up my TR3 for a test start. And a few other bits and bobs down there that we can put to good use. So yeah, so let's get some stuff hooked up and off the floor, and then we'll move on again. All right, guys, the starter switch is now installed in the temporary dash, so that's looking good and operates as it should. So good to go there. We'll just do the wiring when a lin comes on Saturday, or I might actually attempt to wire it up myself. But regardless, the switch is there ready to go, so let's move on to something else. All right, we've got a starter cable hooked up, which will hook up to a battery. Actually, we'll hook it up to probably a set of jumper cables and then to the battery. And then on the other side, I've got a ground strap hooked up. Same thing. So we've got a ground strap hooked up to the engine block. So we'll hook that up. Set of booster cables as well. So that's looking good. I do need to block off a vacuum line here. So we'll come up with something to block this off. So we'll do that now. Okay, brake booster line is now on and plugged. I've just got to kind of run out of the way here to the back and just capped off. So not ready to put the oil in yet. That will be on the day of firing. So getting pretty close, I think, to having mostly everything hooked up that I require. Let me have a little think about it, and then we'll come back and see if I've missed anything. Obviously I need fuel, and I've got a jerry can ready for that outside. I'm going to go and get fresh fuel for it, high octane. So I know I need that. Yeah, let me have a think. So spark plug wires I have. I'm not going to run them yet until I get the distributor set. I do have a new set of the green wires from Roadster Factory and the old set that came off the car. I also have some pedestal shims if need be. So got those standing by, and so we're good to go there. Let's continue looking for stuff. Some wiring for the coil if need be. I've got sort of standing by. A little jumper. and we'll continue on from there. On the coolant, so I've got the coolant standing by over there on the floor. I will put the coolant in it a little bit closer to the startup day. I am going to run coolant in it as opposed to water because I don't know if I've mentioned this or not, but the intent for this chassis is it's going to be spending some time outside in the trailer while we paint the repaint the engine bay before we put the body tub on, so that's why this is going to have coolant in it. Alright, battery fully charged, ready for Saturday. We'll plug the battery pack in and get that charged up and ready to go for Saturday as well. Alright guys, I've got everything wired up as far as I can go, I believe, and I'll get Alin to check my wiring when he comes. I think I've pretty much exhausted what I can do on this car until it gets a little bit closer to start time. So today is Wednesday, and I think we're going to go until probably Friday evening or Saturday until I do a lot of the rest of the stuff. Some of the stuff will be done on the day. Here's my list over here, and you can tell me if this makes sense or not. And if you happen to see something that I've forgotten in my setup for this, let me know in the comment section. That would be appreciated. But I think I've got everything, but there's always something you'll probably forget. So first thing I'm going to do is, and again, this is probably going to be Friday evening or Saturday morning, fluids. So engine oil, gearbox oil, diff oil, and radiator coolant. So I'm going to do all the fluids while I can. Then I'm going to do the oil pressure spin up before we get into setting the distributor up, which means I need to bring the car up to TDC, do the distributor setup. We got to do the end float, and we got to plug in the plug wires and do the tack cable. After that, we're going to check my wiring that I've done prior and continue on doing a little bit more wiring that I need to do. For the temperature gauge, for example, I've got to figure out how that's going to get wired up to the voltage regulator and then to the gauge. So we'll figure that out. Starter switch, fuel pump coil, starter, we're going to figure out, I'm going to check all the connections for that and make sure they're correct. Then we're going to get our gas hooked up to our fuel pump in the front here, somewhere away from the car. Then we're going to get our battery power hooked up, which is going to power the fuel pump, the starter, and the coil. And our power pack, as mentioned, is going to power up the electric fan if required. If the car starts running a little hot, we can always plug that in. So I've got the power pack charging over there for that. And then I think we're ready to attempt to start it. I do have some starting fluid if need be. I do not have the choke cables hooked up. I can probably hold them open manually since I'm going to have possibly 2 or 3 people, or actually 3 people total. Possibly Alina's going to come, and you never know with Les. Les might stop by to give us some entertainment. So I'll have a couple of people that give me a hand, probably starting up and on fire extinguisher duty. So if there's something you happen to see, as I mentioned, that I haven't got covered, let me know and I'll cross it off the list. So we'll upload this tonight, and you can have a look and see what you see. And I'm thinking of live streaming the startup on Saturday. I'm not sure of the exact time yet, but when I know, after discussion with Alin, I'll try to put a time towards it. And for you guys in the UK, I'll try to do it early in the day, probably somewhere around 10 a.m., possibly earlier. So if anybody wants to tune into a live stream, again, it's going to be a single camera live stream, probably from my cell phone, so probably the quality is not going to be great. I do intend on also doing a regular video that I can share afterwards with the normal camera setup that I have, which will probably be a little clearer than the live stream. So, but if you're interested in a live stream, let me know, and I will attempt to set it up out here. If you don't think it's of any value to you, and you just want to go with the regular video footage that I would normally do, I can do that as well. So let me know in the comments whether you value a live stream or not. And like I said, I'll try to plan it Saturday morning for around 9 or 10 in the morning. At least the start of it. I'm not sure how long it'll take us to get this thing fired up. Again, we're in no hurry. There's obviously no guarantee that we'll fire up. We may run into problems that we won't be able to resolve quickly, so it might be a very short live stream. But anyway, we can definitely attempt it. So that's it for tonight. We'll get back out here tomorrow and do a little bit more tinkering. Probably clean the bench up over there, put some stuff away, clear as much stuff out of the garage as possible to get ready for the startup. Saturday, weather-wise, is supposed to be not too bad. I think it's above zero. It's about +3 Celsius because I'm going to have the garage door open a bit. So that will be helpful if it's not freezing cold like -20. So, okay guys, I'm starting to ramble, so we'll end it here and look forward to your comments.